In the discussion of race in America, we're all looking for a deeper understanding. Dan Grossman sat down with a former news photographer who has watched and experienced racial tensions from his childhood in the 1960s to today. He says we're now all paying attention because the video of George Floyd makes it impossible to ignore.
Of all the stories inside the Colleyville Library near Dallas,
wow,
few are as animated
I thought you would say that.
as the ones told by John Jenkins.
I've run into things in my 60s that I ran into in my 20s.
But the story on this day
I keep hoping for it to get better.
is one of struggle still being told in communities of color across the country.
Santos Rodriguez was 11, 12-year-old boy he and his brother were accused of stealing something from a service station. And the cops had him in the car on the back seat and trying to get a confession out of him. And an officer named Daryl Kane thought he'd be smart, and he emptied his gun, so he thought, had a revolver, and put it to the kid's head, and Kane thought it was empty, and he pulled the trigger, and he blew the kid's head off.
It was 1973. John was a 22-year-old news photographer assigned to cover the story.
I think if you sit in the homes of black folks, they'll just sit and say, wow. Been there, done that, we've seen it before.
When you look at what's going on now in our country, how far, if at all, do you feel like we have come as a society in abolishing racism and being more inclusive?
As the song goes, we've come a mighty long way, but yet we have a long way to go. I remember some Hispanic officers arresting two black teenagers. I hadn't heard the N-word used like that in so long. And I just stood and looked at him. And the guy said, "Can I help you?" I said, "No, you already have."
John says he gets it himself, stares when he goes for a walk, a neighbor who sees him and chooses not to wave. He says it's small, but to a community that has felt this for generations, it hurts and builds until it eventually bursts when a death as vivid as George Floyd's happens.
When you first saw that video, what was your reaction?
My reaction is, this is the most valuable tool you can have. Without this, life would be the same, and we'd be going, hey man, the cops beat me up, then they stomped me and they did that, and you go, well, what did you do? Even supporters had doubt, but 8 minutes and 40 seconds, there is no doubt.
John says he thinks it's why we are seeing what we are seeing, and why he hopes the ending to this story is different than the ones that have preceded it.
And I told my mom, and she just kind of chuckled. And she said, you're gonna learn that you're more alike than you're different. And I think if we stop trying to be different and realize that we're alike.
In Dallas, I'm Dan Grossman reporting.